Hello, I'm Roz Stendahl, and I'm here today with a video flip-through of my 2011 Minnesota State Fair Journal. That's what book you see in front of you right now. To the left of the frame, you'll see two little pamphlet books, actually Japanese stab bindings. And these are artist books that I used illustrations from my journal, and I'm reaching around the tripod, trying not to knock things. I made two different artist books. The text is slightly different. Some of the illustrations are the same. But we're going to flip through my journal proper today. But I wanted to show you that once you have done a bunch of sketches from life at the state fair or some other event, you can do fun things like make artist books with them. So I'm going to start now. I'm going to have to walk around the tripod. And this is a journal I bound myself and made a depression in the cover when I was binding it, which I later filled with a scan and print of one of my spin art pieces that I made at the fair. This is a discontinued drawing paper. It's about the same weight as a 140-pound watercolor paper, but it's a discontinued paper, so you won't be able to get it, unfortunately, and neither can I any longer. But I had the paper and made this book. I tend to go a multiple number of times to the state fair, and so that's why you see the different dates here. This time I went 4 trips, and the M11, this is volume M in 2011. I always have my information stamped in my book with a note that they will be reimbursed postage and receive a modest reward if they return my book. This is my first sketch. When I came home that night, I glued down my state fair ticket. I started in the swine barn. I'm working at this point with Faber-Castell Pitt Artist calligraphy pens and watercolor in one of those little mini kids palettes that you've seen on my blog, rozwindup.typepad.com, that I use and carry around. And this is Daniel Smith watercolor. So I will stand in front of the animal pens and look down or across at them and then just sketch from life. At this point, my Niji water brush, which I've been using for like 12 years or something, not the same one, but the brand, actually failed on me and I couldn't get it to release water, so I was squeezing for my life and then opening it and dribbling water out on things. And so this is has a very dry brush effect because I'm using minimal water. I actually called Richard to come and bring me another one when he showed up to meet me later. And as I said, that's the first time in so many years that I've had one fail that I don't consider it a mark against the product. So pigeons, I love pigeons. You have to pick which days you go to the fair because there are various animals on display, and you won't get to see all of them on any given day because they aren't going to be there. I love chickens, so I spend a lot of time with the chickens. Here I've used the Staedtler Pigment Liner 0.1, which I'm very fond of the Staedtler pigment liners because they're easy to paint over. Here I jumped back. Dick has arrived and brought my new Niji water brush, and I'm back to painting, and I'm also back to the Faber-Castell calligraphy pen. At the end of the day, we went by one of the spin art booths, the one that I like, and I made these 2 pieces of spin art, not knowing whether or not I'd like one or the other more. And Dick said something really nice to me at this point. He said that the most fun thing about going to the fair with me was watching the kids watch me have fun making spin art. The next day I went to the fair was the first Saturday of the fair, and it was the Minnesota State Fair Sketch Out 3. And I started again with the calligraphy pen, and this time I sketched some bunnies. I'm sorry, I'm reaching around here trying to stay out of the lens. Then I went back to the pigeons. This is one of my favorite sketches from the fair, all of the trips. It's a curly feathered pigeon. I think that classifies as a fancy breed. Here's a chicken with lots of feathers on his head. And I take notes about who I meet and so on. I went before we were supposed to meet for the sketch out because a lot of times in the sketch out I'll be talking with people and helping them get organized and oriented, and I don't get as much sketch time myself. So I wanted to make sure I had a full 4 hours of sketching before the sketch out began. After our meeting, which happened next, I sat on the street corner and tried to sketch the scene with a friend from the sketch out. But it was just too hot, and this is as far as I got. I couldn't concentrate. I do not like to sit in the direct sun, and the sun came out, and we couldn't change our vantage point. So I think in that sense, or in that case, it's best to abandon and go on to something else. So I went and found some shade and a higher vantage point, and did this look across the fairgrounds. Still a little bit sunstrokey here, and a little bit of trouble focusing on the sheep, but having some fun with the watercolor. And sometimes around the proportions around the center of the page get wonky if I don't hold my book right. And I sort of hit my groove again. I'm quite fond of this one. I write down things that people say while I'm standing and sketching when I overhear their conversations. Write down what things cost at the fair. $7 pork chop on a stick seemed rather expensive to me, but at the end of the day I wrote some notes about what happened at the sketch out. And then this is my third trip. We're starting here on my third trip to the fair. Again, I'm starting with the Faber-Castell calligraphy pen. This cow, as I started to sketch it, the people that were going to show it came over and started getting it ready. And so what I did is I made a quick gesture sketch and then labeled the various blocks of skin on it that were certain colors. That was the most useful that I could be with my time with that animal. Sheep that are waiting to go into the show after they've been shorn to keep them nice and clean, they'll cover them in little outfits, and I think that makes them look kind of like airplane pilots, the little masks on. Some more gesture sketches of sheep. Now I've moved on to the birds who are also in the poultry building. Very agitated, so you just have to wait for them to calm down, and sometimes it's best just to do rough sketches and note what's what about their feet or their heads or their feather coloration, so I make a lot of notes while I wait for them to calm down. I gave up on chickens and went over to a goose and actually did this page spread on the right first and did this fairly finished drawing because he happened to be standing still. And then when that was finished, I did this diagram of color because it was so noisy. I knew I couldn't stand to be in the barn long enough to paint this, and so I just made quick color notes for myself. At the end of the day, again, I collaged my ticket in and wrote some more notes to myself. Oh, the next time I went to the fair was the day of the exploding pen. And all I have to say about that is that you will hear more about the exploding pen on my blog in the next month or so. But the exploding pen, I could not get it to run smoothly, and then it would just blow up on me. So it was a very interesting day. And I had covered my book with a newsprint folded cover because I was worried that this pen would explode because it had exploded in studio testing. And so I wanted to protect the outside of my cover a little bit so there were no major mishaps. But as you can see, I just could not get a decent line. It just kept clogging and skipping and having problems. I was getting quite frustrated. So I went back to the Staedtler pigment liner, which is, after all, my favorite pen, and immediately felt comfortable again. Lovely sheep here and a wonderful sleeping pig. Now I went over to the calligraphy pen and tried to do some goats. And this one worked nicely with some paint. A friend saw me from across the way, someone I hadn't seen for a while, and came up and spoke to me. We're back at birds. This is one of my favorite sketches of the fair. It's a little partridge hen, Plymouth Rock partridge hen, and she happened to be a first prize winner. So I have little details on what some of her feathers are like, and as you'll see later, I do take some photos after I've sketched, so I can have more reference, but I don't feel the need to fill all of this in while I'm there. Most important thing is to get a sense of her personality and what her eye looks like and the skin around her face. That's the most important thing for me. And then little notes like little pink red flaps at the chin, either side of the throat, so her wattles. Here's a more angry looking bantam. They have very long, like seemingly disproportionately long legs. Here's some kind of a rooster, looking very magnificent in his plumage. Now on this day, I went, after sketching in the afternoon, I met my friend Tom, and we went around to the fair to see various things like the art exhibit, and we also went into the Heritage Square, and I saw all the taxidermy, and Tom took a picture of me. There I am looking up at the taxidermy. They're animals that I've never seen before, so some of them, and so I took pictures of them so that I could use them for reference later. And as I said, after I've sketched a bird, I typically will take a couple pictures of it so that I have some references when I go home if I want to paint it and I don't have enough detail in my sketch. I took this picture just because he has a better braid than I do. I call this the best braid at the fair. More notes about my day with Tom. And these were all done the evening when I got home. This is what the poultry building looks like. I don't know if you'll be able to see that in the video. It's pretty vast. Lots of crates with birds in them. It's always very noisy. A gentleman that we met who was shearing his sheep as we were leaving. And then that was the last day that I went to the fair, and so the rest of my fair journal is just odds and ends. This is the day that I picked up my painting. I got a painting accepted in the state fair this year, and it actually won a ribbon in my category. I won an honorable mention. And this was just some summing up that I did about what I liked about this fair trip, this journal, things like that. A couple pages on the artist books that I made. And then friends gave me 2 sketches that they had done at the fair because I'm always bugging people to sketch. And so I put those in here. They are nice to have. And just some paperwork for my art. And that's it. So there's a couple blank pages at the end. I didn't quite fill this journal up this year, but I'm very pleased with it. That's what it looks like. It's got the M11 stamped on the spine, but nothing else. And that's a look at my 2011 Minnesota State Fair journal. If you'd like to see my others, you can go to my blog, and you'll see video flip-throughs and postings on those as well if you look under State Fair in the category. So thank you very much for joining me.